Good evening. I'd like to call the August 18th, 2015 Planning Board meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda is minutes of August 11th. Do we have any?
There were no corrections to the minutes of August 11th. I recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 100%. Thank you. Are there any approval not required plans this evening? Marlene? Nope. Okay, the first item on the agenda is discussion, but we've received a letter from the applicant asking to ask for an extension until October 1st and to table this discussion for this evening. So I'm looking for a motion to table this discussion.
I'll move that we table the discussion for the applicant FWG LLC, the preliminary plan for a proposed planned residential development consisting of 33 units of multifamily housing located at 125 Falmouth Woods Road, Falmouth and McGrath, until October 1st.
Well, no, we'll be discussing it before then, but he's also asking for an extension so it's
okay.
a table and an extension.
Okay, so
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Moving right along. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the building elevations in the FEMA flood zones. And is this a draft I have?
Yes.
Bob, do you want to read the draft to start the discussion off?
Yeah, sure.
Nope.
Only the, before you start, if I could, only the first part has changed. The flood hazard overlay district has not changed. So just the Article 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so this is a draft article to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 240 zoning of the Code of Falmouth in the following manner. 1, amend Article, 14? Dimensional, I want people to write the numbers. Dimensional regulations of the zoning bylaw by adding the following to Section 24070. Maximum building heights. E, in the flood hazard overlay district, the maximum building height shall be 45 feet and the maximum number of stories shall be 2.5. 2, delete the current definition of base flood elevation level from Article 3 definitions. 3, delete Article 18, floodplain zone, and insert in its place the following. Article 18, flood hazard overlay district. And we have that.
That's existing.
That's
Yeah.
existing, so what I just read is what is up for discussion tonight.
So Doug, go ahead, please.
So we talked last time we met about this, and some of us were not inclined to increase it much. Some others felt maybe 5 feet. And I've been thinking about this, and I would want to consider that we make it a relative to the average grade of the property, which we typically, when we're going to build a house, we go with the average grade on the property, and we have 35 feet to work with. Now we're in the flood zone where they're forced to raise their house, and they're not going to always be raising the same amount because different flood zones, different areas require different height to start off with. And I spoke with Marlene about this, and she was pointing out the need for uniformity, so that's where they came with the 45 feet. But I wonder if we could try something new, and it might be challenged, but I think it might be appropriate. I was thinking that we should consider a combination of using the average grade of the property in conjunction with whatever flood elevation is on that property. It would be a calculation for the engineer to do, and I would say that if you're, for example, in a flood elevation of 10, and you have your average grade here, I would give them 50% of the difference between the average grade and the flood elevation that they're at. In some areas, that'll translate, if you have a 10-foot flood elevation, that'll translate to a 5-foot increase in the building height. If you're in a 20-foot flood elevation, that would translate to a 10-foot increase. Marlene's concern was that it's not uniform. It's not applied equally among residents. But I feel like as long as it's 50% for everyone, I think it's uniform. I don't know, it's a new way of thinking of it, but that's my thought. If you guys have any opinion about it.
I kind of like what we have before us. I'd change the heights. I'm not going to go for 45 and 2.5 stories. I'd go for 40 and 2 stories. But I like it because it's the same for throughout town. We're calculating the building height based on the same principles, that it's this certain height, elevation, and then 40 feet to the peak of the building from there. And if it happens that you can't get a 2.5-story building in this zone, so be it. You might have to do a 1.5-story. We keep talking about coastal resiliency and retreating from the coast, and I don't want to incentivize people building 2.5-story buildings in these types of zones. Jim has also mentioned the fear of this big wall around the coast. I think when you're only allowing another 4 feet above somebody else, it's not going to be that big of a difference. I'm very concerned about windage on buildings. I was down in Hatteras, I think it was after Ivan, and there were these buildings that had chunks of them blown off. And the conventional wisdom in Florida was you hunkered to the ground for hurricanes and wind damage. So I also worry about fire. You have a building that's on fire that's higher than other buildings, the detriment that could have. During Hurricane Sandy, there was a whole neighborhood that burned to the water line where the houses were flooded. So fire is not something uncommon during these major events, nor is a fire when there isn't a storm. I mean, we could be creating all kinds of havoc with buildings that are much higher than neighboring buildings. So I think to keep it simple, we just start with this base elevation and work from there and live with the 40-foot restriction.
Ralph, excuse me.
Yeah, that's all right. From a practical point of view, I'll defer to those who deal with buildings all the time and try to sell buildings all the time. What good does a half a story do for a person who's trying to build something? I don't see the practicality of it.
It is primarily an attic.
Right, so it's not really habitable space. You can
Well,
store
it can
things in
be
it.
if you take your attic and you put dormers in, they don't come above the ridge, and your collar ties aren't there, and you get 7.5 feet, it actually can become a 3rd story.
Okay, so you can get
It's called 2.5.
habitable in a half story at the top
Right.
with dormers.
The depth-
Okay,
could-
yeah.
Go ahead, Doug's
Yeah.
built them.
To define it, it's the habitable area of that 3rd floor space has to be half or less of the floor below.
Right.
That's measured at the point where the roof intersects with the wall at 5 feet. So depending on how you arrange the roof, you can get a nice little space in the top floor that's usable.
Okay,
If you have 1,000 square foot ground floor, 1,000 square foot second floor,
Yeah.
you can have 500 square feet on the 3rd floor inside that half story.
yeah.
That's where the 2.5 story comes in.
And there are some houses that are 500 square feet. And people, people survive in them.
There are houses.
There are houses that are 500 square feet that people live in.
Yeah.
So to say that,
Oh, yeah, I see what
That's-
you're saying.
that's a pretty good example, that
Yeah.
1,000-foot and a 500-foot top floor.
Okay. All right, I'm just trying to get that around my head because I didn't figure the half story was that significant, but it definitely could be, especially if it's got water view or that kind of thing,
Ralph, my house is 1.5 stories.
Yeah,
So my bedroom's and a bath are upstairs,
right.
so,
You can see the vineyard from the house.
no.
But under today's building code, you could put a whole second floor and a half a story on top of it. So that's, Bob, I'm a little concerned, or don't understand, you want to take away the half-story? What did you mean?
Well, if,
I don't think that's, my opinion, I think the height is the issue.
it is, yeah, the height's the issue.
But defining, taking that may open up more things that I don't know, I don't quite understand.
Well, I guess if you can fit 2.5 stories in 40 feet.
That's the
then-
point.
yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
I believe it should be left
Yeah.
that, if we agree to that number. I don't think it's necessary to change the half-story.
Yeah, because they can design whatever they want.
That's,
They can fit
all
it in.
that really does is limit the size of the third floor. It can only be half of the second.
Yeah,
And it's not the whole floor, it's the floor immediately under it. So if you have a great big building and you have a one-story wing and you have a two-story high part, you can only build the half-story over the two-story, you can't raise the whole.
And they may choose to go with short wall heights just to get more
Yeah.
living space.
yeah.
7'4", or,
Yeah, I suppose it's a moot point if we're going by the actual height, maximum building
Okay.
height.
So, all right, so we have two things that have been proposed. One, going of 50% of the difference between the ground elevation and the base flood elevation, which is, I understand, and I think that works, but also the other one is just making it a maximum of 40 feet and let them deal with it. Paul?
Most of these sites are fairly unique. However, when you open yourself up to different locations, it's a can of worms. So I think we have to be consistent. And you can't say in this particular district, you're 45 feet, this is 40. I don't think that's going to be very operable. So I'd be in favor of the lower level and work with that, the 40 feet that Bob was proposing. But all the sites are different. but you
Yeah,
can't make them
every
all
piece of land is unique. And even though even if you're in a VE 18, which your base elevation would be VE 20, every parcel in that section has a different ground elevation.
Right,
Every
right.
single one. They have to get a certificate elevation and they measure it, and
So
so the
you could
math is
have
different.
a 40-foot house that's 5 feet
Well,
higher
and-
than the one in front of it.
You'd end up having this, which
Yeah.
may or may
Which
not
is-
be a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
gonna work itself out.
The discussion is 5 feet.
I just want to clarify something, just a question. If we change the height, maximum height, does that allow them to build a structure above 35? Say we said 45 feet. Can they build a home that's bigger than 35 feet high? Say like they're in a VE flood zone of 5. I don't know if there is one or not. And we raise it to 45. Could they actually build a 40-foot home to fit that if we change this? Or does the building code still limit the site of the building? That's something that I wanted to ask
No,
about.
That's a good.
Because what happens if we go down the road and like with the one that Doug projects, I see no problem with that, but what happens if they change the floodplain things and we create that 45 and what used to be in a 10, all of us, for some reason, gets moved to a 5? Could these people, then build a 40-foot home in that area? That's what I wanted to know.
Yes.
I would think so, because we're.
I mean, 40 foot
Yeah.
from the base to the base.
Yeah,
Well, from the ground, what I think Bob's suggestion was from whatever the average grade is.
yeah.
Right, no,
Which
I'm
is
just
what
talking
we
about the
measure.
physical dimension of the house. Right now, it can only be 35 feet tall.
From the average grade.
Right.
Right.
And he's
I mean,
saying, he
this-
suggested 40 from the average grade in the flood zone.
No, I understand that.
And Doug's suggesting a sliding scale between 40 and 45, depending
Depending
on
on
whatever
where
the
you
ground elevation is. So we're bouncing around in the same, Marlene, you have something to add?
So Ken's question, the short answer is yes. But what that means is so you have a conforming foundation with your sill height is at your conforming foundation, whether that's elevated on pilings or not. And from that point, you have, right now, there's a maximum building height of 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. If you change that to, let's use 45, just in this example. If you change that if you give people an extra 10 feet in order to elevate onto pilings, If they don't need the 10 feet plus if they need less than 10 feet for their BFE plus the required freeboard, then yes, they would have that extra space would still be allowable for building. Most of the elevations, and we have given you some, you're totally safe with 5 feet. We have almost no elevations where anything's less than 5 feet for base flood elevation. 10, there may be, if you were to build in a buffer of 10 feet, there may be a couple properties where if they maxed it out, it would be slightly over that 35 feet.
I mean, the limiting factor too is 2.5 stories.
Yeah.
No, I understand, and that was the thing that I don't want to give somebody that, we're trying to give relief.
Yeah.
I don't want to allow somebody
Yeah.
to build a 38-foot tall house because something changed, that's all. But
I think that's what Doug's position does, it ties it to
The need.
the need.
But it could be higher than, but there's no cap, so you know what I mean?
Well,
That's why you'd have to put a cap.
Well, I think he is talking about a cap,
Well, actually, I didn't mention it, but I
That's
guess
what-
there should be a cap.
yeah.
I think I feel safer because of that, getting the answer is yes, technically, a 40-foot. I can see that there's no real 5s. And if a whole section of the town changed the floodplain zone, we could then come back.
You can change this again.
We can come back and say, okay, we need to change this floodplain zone to be something different. You know?
But if we do it on that 50% thing that I suggested, you wouldn't have to change it because it would already be flexible. Flexibility would be built in.
Ralph?
Yeah, we could add in there, you're talking about building height, but you could also add something in there about the height of the structure. Okay, so you could say, in the flood hazard, the maximum building heights will be 45 feet with a maximum of 35 feet for the structure. Add that
Except your foundation
that
is part of
language.
your structure. By definition, I believe
That's why.
foundation is.
Well, above the foundation, a maximum of 35 feet above the foundation, you should be able to differentiate between the building height and the height of the structure, which is what Ken's asking
And
about.
I didn't know if that could be done or not, but that was the concern that I had
Well,
on it.
I don't really get it. I think they're both one and the same. The building height is the top of the ridge of the house,
Yeah, but how far down do you go then, okay?
to the grade of the
To the
ground.
ground.
I know that, but he's saying he wants to limit it to 35 feet down.
Well, it is 35 feet now.
And this is allowing you to go 40 feet down.
Right.
That's my point.
Well, 35 feet's already in existence.
Yeah.
That's already there.
Right.
So the question is, are we going to add 5 feet to it?
Well, if, what you would be doing, if you're just saying you're allowed 35 feet above, from your building line, from the top of your foundation, then we'd have 55-foot tall buildings.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter about the foundation.
No, it's from the average ground. Don't get into that because everything's different.
It's from the grade.
It has to
The
be from the
foundation is
average
part of
grade.
your house, whatever type of foundation it is. It's just from the average grade to the top of the ridge. And no matter what you build out, you build it, it's where the ground is and where the top of the ridge, no matter what your house is made of.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just, he had a question about it.
Marlene has some more to
Yep.
add?
Yeah, I do want you, we've taken another look. First, we looked in the definition section and that was clearly not sitting well. But I just want you to understand some of how the bylaw is structured. So in this Article 14 are your dimensional requirements. That's your setbacks, your lot coverage, your minimum lot widths, areas and frontages. All of those dimensional standards are in there. And there's also this section 240-7 that deals solely with building heights. And that's where you find the language that the maximum building height is is 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. There are already exceptions to that in the bylaw. So going this route would add another exception to your list. So right now, already in place, for agricultural uses in agricultural districts, it's a 50-foot height limit. In public use districts, for, municipal purposes, it's a 50-foot height not to exceed 3 stories not to exceed 50 feet. And in LID, your tech park, it's 40 feet, not to exceed 3 stories. So this would be, and those are all ceilings. Those are all just, caps across the board. So if you're in that district, in that zoning district, this is an overlay district, which would function as a zoning district for the affected properties, and it would be another ceiling that would be exempted from your standard 35 feet. So the planning board and town meeting have already identified that certain uses, agricultural, municipal, some, large industrial uses already need more than 35 feet for certain reasons. If you find that you have a legitimate purpose to exceed that, this is how the town has done it in the past.
So I guess, how strongly do you feel in your opinion, Doug? Do you really want to go
I
with it?
just throw it out there to see if you guys thought it made sense. If it would be unique, but that was my idea.
I worry about opening a can of worms with properties on the line. Attorneys can go and, well, our property is partial in this and partial in that, so do they get the cut in between? And so I think...
Yeah, they have to.
And that's why I think it's easier to go with a...
Well, it would be the same, either way. I mean, the math, when you're in 3 different flood zones, the vertical, especially if you're in the velocity zone, the first vertical has to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation for the whole thing. You could, but I don't think you want a foundation that goes like that. I mean, you really like your ground floor all in one level.
And whatever project you're going to do, you're going to have an engineer. He's going
It's
to
the engineer.
establish these things for
Yeah.
you. So they could easily do the 50% calculation.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of whether or not you guys think it's fair that somebody in an elevation of 20 has a right to have a 45-foot house when somebody in an elevation 10 is having a 40-foot house. They're not getting really any more usable space because the extra height that we give them is used up by the pilings. We just have to have taller stairs. The reason I suggested it was because of the layout and the development of this area in Silver Beach where this 19 is pretty prevalent. The reason I would be not objecting to taller buildings there is because it's not like it's a scenic vista that a lot of people are driving by, like the way Surf Drive is, where you have a lower elevation. I think that the giant structures along that stretch is more detrimental to our town. It's more visible, and I think it would be less effective. I don't know, you guys have to decide if you think it's fair or not.
Well, how much time do we have, Marlene? Do we want to draft this 2 different ways and put it in writing and then have us bring it up again and vote on it?
So the warrant closes September 4th. Next week you'll be meeting. You'll have to vote something next week.
You guys be prepared to vote one way or the other with a little discussion next week after we get the details drafted, or do you want to go with it now?
I mean, it would be better, it would be better for us to know exactly what you want so we can come back to you next week with, at least the concept that you want. And then we can come back to you next week with the language.
Well, let's just decide tonight
So-
if you think the 50% or if you think we should just go with the standard.
I mean, I understand what Doug's saying, and I think I would rather go with something that we know, it's been around for a while, we know how it works, and then if we find that there are problems or complaints or whatever, we could always go back and amend it or change it to what Doug is suggesting, as opposed to starting out that way. I really wonder how much this is really going to have an effect, how many people are going to actually be affected by this? How many people are going to be raising their houses up? How many people are just going to decide to self-insure? I mean, we saw a bunch of houses.
No, this is a building code issue. This isn't a self-insurance.
Right, but only if you decide to rebuild or renovate.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Oh, these are being built right now.
Right.
I mean, there's examples.
Oh, I know, yeah. And what I'm saying is
Moses
that.
Road last year, Old Dock Road and
Yeah,
Chappaqua Road right now.
Yeah, people that are building new or renovating that have to meet new code. Yeah, that's true, but somebody who has a little cottage there that's been there since 1940 may decide to just let it go. And,
It's going to have an effect as soon as we have a storm,
yeah.
and if it's in place or not.
Yeah.
It's going to have an effect where somebody decides, without even a storm, a property changes hands, it's been a little cottage, it's built way down on the plan, and somebody buys it, it's right in the water, and they realize they can go up 40 feet high. And the existing houses haven't been knocked down in a storm, they're there, and they're 1.5 stories, they're 18 feet high, and their neighbors, by right, will go to 45 feet.
And if we go with the standard 40, you got another example like the one on the corner of Bristol Beach that was just built. It happens to be on a little bit of a higher setting.
Yeah.
That could be a 40-foot, right? Or is it, maybe it's not a flood zone then? That one right on Bristol Beach, it has to be in a flood zone.
No, its foundation was done before July 14th last year.
That-
They got into the old code.
Yeah, it's hard to judge because a lot of people pulled permits
Yeah.
before the maps
Right.
All right.
went into effect, but they're
You got your-
building now.
Oh,
Yeah, if you got your permit, you got 2 years to build, and if you applied there's still another pipeline of them that could keep coming. You've
Yeah,
got another
there-
year to keep building
there
on the
are.
old.
And that's what I'm
old
saying,
code.
there are people that are choosing to do this.
Right. So we have two differences of opinion here. Anybody
I'm
else?
more inclined for the 40 feet cap,
What do you think, Ralph?
a standard for that reason.
Yeah, that's 40 feet
Paul?
fine with me.
40. Okay.
So why don't you draft it up 40 feet, we'll bring it back for,
Okay, it will pretty much be this language right
Okay.
here, except for,
Change that to,
and can we just, can we talk about is everybody okay with the 2.5 stories?
yes, I
Yeah.
think we
Okay.
covered that.
Yeah,
If they can fit it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Right, right.
Okay?
All right.
So if you want to vote it tonight,
Yeah,
you
let's-
can.
You want to, Doug, you want to move it?
Okay.
Well, no,
I move that we accept Bob's recommendation.
Well, we've all agreed, so it doesn't matter, right?
you didn't vote, you didn't agree yet.
Well, you
no,
know,
you can vote against it.
No, I won't vote against it.
That's, I thought they were sure it would go through.
funny.
yeah.
No, I think you should.
Okay.
So, I'd like to amend this draft article to read that in section 1E, the flood hazard overlay district, the maximum building height shall be 40 feet, and the maximum number of stories shall be 2.5 stories.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? Yes, Ralph?
So what's the purpose of these?
For reference for the
That's-
different areas of the
The blue areas are all impacted by the flood zone.
And they all show the number of flood elevations that we're talking about?
so they're just, yeah, it's just,
There's no, I don't
See the
understand
black
the coloring.
numbers? See the-
I need an explanation
okay,
of
so
what these are.
I
funded.
also emailed them to you so you can zoom in on them, but
I did
the green.
copy them.
The green areas are V zones, and the blue areas are A zones. And we're just trying to give you some examples of the differences in the elevations between some of the A's and the V's. And one thing I do want you to be aware of, looking at these are not the firms. These are not the FEMA firms. These are maps that we've done at the parcel level. So if a piece of the parcel is in an A or a V zone, the entire parcel will be colored that way. So it's especially important for, like, if you look at the page with Quistit Campus on it, a slight area of Quistit Campus, the edge of it, is in the A zone. The buildings on Quistit Campus are not. So we're not trying to be misleading, but this is not, these are not the firms, these are GIS maps that we've created, and it just gives you the areas that are, the parcels that, a portion of which may be impacted.
Right, and we don't know if there's dwellings on these on all these parcels, do we?
Well, I mean, the very faint gray is our building layer.
What is the bit, what, I'm sorry.
It's hard to see. The very faint gray squares, solid squares.
Yeah, what about the gray squares?
That's our building layer on our GIS maps. So those are roofs.
So those parcels are improved.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have
Well,
a,
it appears that there's a large number of lots that are still eligible to be built on in the blue zone.
In the A zone, yes, there's vacant land in the A zone.
A lot of it.
Yeah, there's the potential for it. A lot of this is also protected open space. It's either, it's in CR or it's, the town owns it, a lot of these pieces.
and the 100-foot setback is not represented here either, Ralph.
No,
What is?
The 100-foot setback from a resource, which would make it so it's not buildable,
Yeah.
that's not represented here
Right,
either. So
right,
this
yeah.
is like a softening of the lines, or an extension. If a parcel touches it, they count out the whole thing, whether it's buildable or not.
yeah. We didn't want to confuse you with these, but we just wanted to give you an example of the differences between, like if you look on the back of the first page, the cliffs area, which is kind of this bump out right here. So in some cases, because the topography is so extreme, you could have a V-zone lot next to a lot that's not even close to a flood hazard area because they're already so much higher. So if there's already a house on the high ground, if their neighbor is elevating, they may not be impacted because they're already so much higher just on the ground. And that is not the case on the south coast, which the later pages show.
Those are the people that are gonna really have short houses because the flood elevation is 19.
And that may be at but their lot may be so steep that where they're building their house may be out of the line anyway. Because if the zone is just catching the edge of your lot, but you're not putting your house there, then
You may not.
you may not be affected.
Because it's still measuring from grade.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any more discussion? A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is Falmouth Economic and Development Industrial Corporation on the landfill. And I have asked the town council to give an opinion, because I sit on that board as well, whether I should participate in this, and he advised me I should recuse myself, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to leave the room right now. And I'll have Paul take it from here.
Next item on the agenda is the Falmouth Economic Development Industrial Corporation. to discuss the proposed use of the closed landfill in the town of Falmouth. And we're pleased to have Michael Galasso, Chairman of EDIC, here to make the presentation.
There is an easel.
You want us to go?
Oh, the easel's right there.
You want the easel?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, for the TV.
If you put it on the easel, the TV guys can
Zoom in on it.
zoom in.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us this evening. I'm Michael Galasso. I'm the chairman of the EDIC Board of Directors, and here this evening to give you a little bit of background on this project, what's been going on in the last 3 years, and where we're headed over the next few months. So 3 years ago, in July of 2012, the town and the EDIC entered into a memorandum of understanding for us to study the potential redevelopment and opportunities at the closed and capped landfill. So we're talking about 45 of the 53 acres. So we're not including this portion over here, which is the waste management facility. So in late 2012, we issued a request for proposal to hire a consulting engineer who had experience in reusing closed landfills, and we selected Weston and Sampson to prepare a redevelopment and reuse feasibility plan, which first examined the economics of various reuses of the landfill and to help us select the most economic reuse. A copy of their report dated March 2014 has been emailed, I believe, to all the members of your board. We conducted a number of public hearings over the past 3 years and solicited input from a number of town committees before determining that the highest and best use and the use that would provide the town with the most beneficial return is to reuse the landfill for solar development, which, according to the studies, could generate up to 5 megawatts of power and could save the town between $200,000 to $500,000 a year, or $4 to $10 million over a 20-year period. The cost to develop the project is estimated to be between $10 and $12 million. The EDIC is in the process of preparing 2 articles for this town, for the fall town meeting. One article is to rezone the property, probably to light industrial C, which allows solar development. And the second article is to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a long-term lease negotiation with the EDIC for a lease of the property. So once our attorneys draft those articles and submit them to the town manager's office, we will be back before you for additional discussion on the rezoning request. Time is of the essence here. One of the main financial tools that are used by developers to develop these projects, these solar projects, that they have done in many towns here on the Cape and throughout the country, is renewable energy tax credits. Those tax credits expire at the end of next year, which means that this project would need to be placed in service, which means I'd have to turn the power on by 12/31/16. So that's why time is a little bit of the essence here and why we are requesting to be in front of the town meeting this fall. If you may recall, we did a presentation to the Springtown meeting just to give them a background on the project, prepare them for the request that would be moving forward. So I'm here to answer any questions that I can and provide you any additional information that you may need so that when we come back before you, hopefully in the next few weeks, that you're well prepared to ask any additional questions, and we'll have our consultants here and attorneys and everyone else. So this was an opportunity to just put it on your agenda for discussion purpose, and hopefully I can answer questions you may have this evening.
Okay. Hi, Michael. Is there any negative impacts from a solar field that we might not think of?
We're not aware of any. I mean, in any project there are obviously unknowns, but based upon the research consultants have done. There are still a number of steps that have to be taken with the state as far as putting solar panels over the capped landfill. So we have submitted an application to Eversource, and they have determined that there is capacity in the grid to take this amount of power. And there is a fee because of some upgrades they need to do, and that fee would be covered in part of the development cost of the project. But we're glad to hear that at least they can take the power that would be generated. And the town still can use the power, though we have used renewable energy on many buildings throughout the town. Both the town and the schools can utilize the power that would be generated from here. So as far as any negatives from a cost standpoint, solar panels have been put on capped landfills in many instances, so we're not anticipating any, but obviously it would carry contingencies in the project budget for any unforeseens that might come up.
I was really not thinking in terms of financial negatives, more in terms of adverse effects like glare or any impacts to neighboring residences. Would it create a giant heat sink or any kind of stuff like that? I guess we'll all have to do a little more research about it, but...
Yeah, and that's a good question, and it's something we can ask the engineers to bring back any information they may have on where others have been built.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, are you looking for a rezoning article for this fall's town meeting?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Mike, what happens if you don't hit the deadline for the tax exemption?
For the allocation of the tax credits?
Yeah, the tax credit,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Probably what would happen is the economics would change pretty drastically.
Would
because
it knock this out of the, would it kill this project?
Not necessarily would kill it, but it would change the economics. The benefit to the town would still get renewable energy, but the cost may not be as beneficial, so we probably wouldn't see the savings.
Do you see a timeline where this is a reasonable goal to get it done by that date?
Yeah, and what we're doing because of that is we're really doing two things in parallel. We're here requesting the two articles, but at the same time, we're going to be issuing a request for proposal to developers, even though we don't have the zoning and we don't have a lease, because in order to really enter into the lease with the town, we want to really know what the numbers are besides what we have estimated.
Yeah.
And the best way to know the numbers is issue a request for proposal, get those from the actual developers who put these projects together. So our hope is that by doing that, and if we're successful at the fall town meeting, that we'd be able to start the project rather quickly, right after the first of the year. I'm sure there's still some hurdles we'll have to go through, but that's why we've gone ahead and made the application to NSTAR/Eversource to make sure there was power there and what the cost will be to connect to it. A lot of times towns don't do that till after the fact, but we wanted to do that right up front so we can tell the developers this is what it's going to cost and this is where you can connect. So we've sort of been, moving ahead under the assumption that we're going to get the approvals that we need, and the EDIC has been spending money to do that in the hopes that we're successful at the fall town meeting and they can quickly put the project together. But that's a good question, and I will ask our consultants, what is the financial impact if we don't make the deadline at the end of next year?
I hope town meeting does support this because it has been done in other towns very successfully. And Brewster I know for one, and I think there's another one on the Cape. Yep. So this is a great use of that space, and I hope this goes through.
Thank you.
I just have a question kind of on top of that. You said you have to have the power on. Does it all have to be done? Can you get, like, say you were able to finish half of it? Is that a possibility that you would still get tax credits if it wasn't completed, or does the whole project have to be completed?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the renewable tax credits I am for like affordable housing tax credits and other projects, but in that instance, if you have one unit that's placed in service, it qualifies for the whole project. I'm not sure whether if you have one panel here,
I sure hope so,
puts
because that would...
the rest of them
that would
placed in
really
service, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could you explain to us, Mike, about how the revenue stream of this goes? If, I assume that you'd bond this thing to build it, and then there would be, you would sell the electricity to the grid, and you would receive cash benefits from that, and then, so the EDIC could have a revenue stream from this, and part of the revenue could go to paying off the bond, and part of the revenue could be used for operational expenses for EDIC, something like that. Can you run that by us?
Sure. What's being contemplated is that the project will be, we will select a developer who will develop the whole field. They will be responsible for the financing. So it's not going to be a town-issued bond or town financing that we're going to be providing for the developer. So the developer will go out and get the financing that's required to build the project. And part of that financing is the tax credits that they sell, which goes towards building the project. The EDIC is hoping to enter into a long-term lease with the town, and then we will sublease it to the developer. And the EDIC, through negotiations with the town, will get a portion of the benefits that the developer will pay. So the developer will pay like a ground lease to the EDIC. And that will be what would flow to the EDIC. And then the town would benefit from the savings of the power through a power purchase agreement.
So the developer will receive revenues from the NSTAR or whoever it is, the Eversource?
Yeah, they'll make.
How will they pay off their cost of that?
They'll make a spread between what they're selling the power to the town for and what they're getting from Eversource. And that's how they pay off their loan that they have on the project.
Okay, thank you.
Ralph, I think I can help you with that. There are programs for a homeowner where a company will come in, install the panels for you, no cost to you. So you're generating power for this company, and they're giving you a share of that power, a discounted rate on the power. So you don't actually own the panels themselves. So there's no upfront cost for you, as opposed to somebody who has bought the panels, had them installed, you gain all the benefit. This is kind of a cost-sharing situation where we're not putting the money up front. This company is going to come in and do that, and we receive the benefit from the lease on the land and the discounted rate of electricity that is generated. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's basically correct. It's the same way it has when you're basically leasing your roof space to them to put the panels on.
Right.
And they'll sell you the power at 17 cents a kilowatt hour versus you paying 20 cents. And then they sell the power at some rate to Eversource. So they're making that spread in between.
Right, but how does EDIC get a piece of the action?
Just through the ground lease payment that they will make. So on top of that, they will
lease the ground
from the EDIC. There'll be
so it's a sublease because you're leasing it from the town.
That's correct. Yeah.
So there's two leases involved.
Yep. There's the lease that we'd have with the town, and then a lease between the solar developer and the EDIC.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and I think if you look at the projections, that dollar is right now projected at about $60,000 a year.
What's $60,000 a year?
That's the amount of the sublease that the developer will pay to the EDIC.
Okay. Thank you.
I actually had a couple of questions.
Sure.
One was about schedule. I think you've addressed that. Another one, you said the cost is anticipated $10 to $12 million. Does that include the connection fees from NSTAR? Because I understand that could be very severe.
Yeah, I think in this case, and that's a good question, I don't have the exact number, but the connection fee to NSTAR is about $90,000 to $100,000. So that's not too bad for a project of this size. And so that would be absorbed into the cost to develop the project and in the rest of the economics between the developer and the EDIC and what the town's going to benefit out of it too.
Is that including the 10 to 12 million?
No, it's probably above that. Yeah, that number, that 10 to 12 was derived before we knew what the cost was going to be to connect. That was just based off of, let me turn this around if I could a second. So here's the sort of the preliminary layout.
That was my next question.
A site plan. And this is 5.3 megawatts. And there is some discussion that they can probably get more panels on there than what's being planned, which will generate a little bit more and change the economics a little bit. But as you can see, there's some areas, there's some slope into some of these areas and stuff, but they have put panels on areas that, slopes do not generate as much as the more flatter areas, but we might be able to generate more than the 5.3.
Most of the area is going to be covered with solar panels then.
Yeah, yeah.
And the developer, whoever it is going to come up with whatever technology he feels comfortable with, because the technology is changing rapidly.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll come up with the most, economic, most efficient, and they'll also be responsible for maintaining it too, because there's still some testing that goes on here constantly on the cap landfill. And who's going to pick up the cost for that is part of the negotiations that we need to have with the town. There's monitoring and so on.
Do they anticipate movable panels since we're so far north?
I don't know, we haven't, I don't know.
But being so far north, sometimes that becomes an issue.
Yeah, yeah. And snow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so this is zone currently public use,
Yes, it is.
and it's going to be changed to LIA. I mean, that's your zoning
LC1.
request. LIA?
I thought it was LC.
I believe you said LIC.
LIC.
LIC, I
Okay,
believe is what-
okay, when it goes to
what's being
LIC.
anticipated.
When it goes to LIC, and then you have, so currently, it's not on the tax rolls, because it's public use. Now, when it goes to LIC, and you have a lease to a developer who is running a business on that, will that business then be taxed by the town?
Good question. Don't have the answer for it, but I'll look into it.
Okay.
Yep, good question.
We tried, Michael. We tried to stop you. You did a good job. Are there any other questions?
Is there any chance that the RFP will give some kind of preference to made in USA products?
We definitely can put that in there.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. We issue a lot of requests for proposals. We're doing it now, as Paul knows, on the Falmouth station and stuff, and we try to emphasize local. And if I know local folks who are in this business, I personally contact them and send them a copy of the RFP. And so we try to get local folks involved as much as possible.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Here for the planning board, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Very
We'll be
helpful.
back and see you in a month or so for the meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
And I'll get answers to your questions.
And told Jim it's safe to come back.
Yeah.
Okay, not a month or so, because the warrant closes.
Yeah, on the
in-
4th.
Yeah, so.
But I think we come back to you, I believe, and I'm not real sure of the sequence, but after we actually file the warrant, when you guys review all the
Yeah.
articles for town meeting, I think
Yeah,
that's
okay.
when we'll be back. And I'm not sure that date will fit in your calendar, but I believe that's the process.
Thanks for taking the initiative there. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.
Next item on the agenda is general correspondence, and is this the only one we've already discussed?
Right, and that was for that item.
We've already discussed it, was the tabling of the previous article. That's the only thing in the file. And the next item is future agenda items.
I have one.
I'm sure we do, yes.
So, in light of our recent developments of all the things that we need to be working on, I'm finding that staff is challenged to get our planning stuff done, and I'm wondering if we should have a discussion about limiting our role of supervising special permits. Not that we have any wind turbines in front of us, but that's one, and maybe we should look into other areas where we could perhaps delegate authority to ZBA rather than be special permit granting authorities. I feel like it sort of bogs us down. I wonder if we really are the best people to be doing it.
How many special permits do we?
Not many.
Not many, but it doesn't take much to throw a frog in there.
Oh, I mean, 9 hours of testimony.
You know? I just wonder, I don't know if there's areas that we can reduce our workload there, but it does seem to be time-consuming, and as I mean, I just don't think we are the most efficient at it.
I wonder if that would come under the job of the people that are doing the revision of the code book, the zoning book.
I don't know, it seems like maybe a discussion we would have to relinquish our own authority in certain areas if we chose to do that.
Yeah, we'd have to have.
We can't have the discussion now, but
Yeah.
that's the gist of my future item.
Right.
One of the things, Marlene, we could have is a list of all the things that we are the special permit granting authority on. I don't think we already know that. We don't know, you may know them all, but,
I mean, we would have to go through.
Go through the book.
And do that analysis, and.
and then have discussion.
And I do want to address Bob's question, though, because that's really important. The answer is no.
No.
So that in order to change something substantive like that, it would take an article at town meeting. So someone who is brought in to rewrite the code could recommend that.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't think,
Could
I knew they couldn't just come in and,
Okay.
oh, this is what it's going to be. No.
Okay.
I was looking for their recommendations, and if that was something that we could tell them, we'd like you to highlight those items that
Yes,
the
that's
planning board.
possible. So for example, during that code analysis, they would develop that list.
Right.
And then they could give you recommendations, or you could just say, well, we don't want to do, let's say, we don't want to do wind turbines anymore, but we want to keep retail sales of over 7,000 square feet, the CVS. So, there's a lot of them kind of strewn about.
Right.
Throughout the bylaw, and you've been creating more. So I don't have a good number, but that could be part of that analysis.
Yeah, I'm looking at that as why have the staff do it when we already have somebody that we're paying to do something like that could be incorporated in their analysis.
It certainly could be. It's an unwieldy job
Yeah.
already
Oh, yeah.
as it is,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But I will put it on the list to bring back to you on a future agenda.
Okay.
And we're gonna, can I have another one?
No. Yes, of course.
One to Augusta.
We're gonna miss our deadline for doing anything to improve the affordable housing situation as far as a new adjustment to the in-law apartment for town meeting. We're not gonna be able to fit that in because we haven't taken any action on it. But we did discuss that at the joint meeting with selectmen, the need for that, and we said that that was a goal of ours. And when I'm realizing the staff is so busy with other things, that's what the impetus for this. So a second agenda item would be to reconstitute that discussion about whether or not we can do anything to make the zoning easier for in-law apartments and so forth. Just want to bring that back up again. Whether it's multifamily housing or whatever we can do to make progress on that. Okay.
Anybody else?
And I always say coastal resiliency, so I'll let that one slide this time.
I did have a brief meeting with Doug Jones, Brian, and Julian about the agenda for the joint meeting, and all those things were discussed and they'll be addressed at the joint meeting. However, the gist of the meeting is going to be transportation, and those will kind of be things that we're going to talk. And I pushed hard for another joint meeting with them, where they would be at the beginning and not at the tail. But they do keep getting pushed back. I did try to push them forward for this one. There's something that's pressing with transportation that needs to come through. The study's finally done. And they got a commitment that they're going to have more joint meetings, and the very next one after this will focus on all three issues that you just mentioned.
Okay. That's good.
And what's the date of the joint meeting?
They're going to commit to it at the next meeting.
Oh, the current joint meeting is September 22nd.
Right,
September 22nd.
yes.
Yes.
That's and at that meeting, there hopefully we'll be able to commit to when the next one is, and it'll be within a month, hopefully still this year, maybe December. And there was talk about a workshop type meeting as well, a Saturday meeting. And the need for it was made clear, and that'll be a discussion we all have.
Well, just want to say, I think the joint meetings we've had with the Board of Selectmen have been very helpful, the last couple of ones we've had, so I certainly would encourage more of those.
Well, it was a good discussion, but when we look now back to, it was a few months ago,
No follow-up.
we haven't really accomplished anything from that discussion, so,
Well, follow through with something.
right.
There's nothing else on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All set, thank you.